Tonight on Steelers Talk, I'm going to be recapping Adam Thielen's first day in Pittsburgh, had his first official practice today, and his official new number has been revealed. Then we'll get into some bad news on the injury front as we prepare for the dreaded Ratbirds here in Week 14. And then Coach Tomlin took the podium yesterday, and he addressed recent frustrations from both the Steelers fans and players in an answer that I actually thought was pretty darn good from the Steelers head coach. Make sure you guys stick around to see what Coach T had to say about the recent calls for him to be fired or traded or whatever. But before we get into the rest of today's show and before we get into the content today, make sure you guys click that subscribe button if you haven't already. We are in the middle of a sub-battle between us and Ravens Rundown, our Ravens channel this week, guys, just to remind you guys, but make sure you guys click that subscribe button for daily Steelers videos on this channel every single day for free. Breaking news coverage. We had breaking news yesterday with Adam Thielen being claimed. Every time the con artist makes a big move, whether it's during the season or during the off season, we make sure to get you guys coverage. Also, our live show coverage. We went live yesterday. We're going live again tomorrow, and we'll be going live on Sunday for Ravens Week, and it's all 100% free, guys. So make sure you click that subscribe button to join the only Steelers news program with over 100,000 subscribers here on YouTube. With that, let's get into today's news and rumors slate, starting with Adam Thielen, who made his first appearance in a Steelers practice today. He had to fly to Pittsburgh last night after being claimed by Pittsburgh yesterday on waivers, and he will officially be wearing the number 16. There is a picture of Adam in today's practice. It was being held indoors for the Wednesday practice here for the Pittsburgh Steelers. And Aaron Rodgers spoke about Adam Thielen today to the media and his feelings on Adam joining the team here. He says, "We'll see how quickly he can get up to speed with the playbook." I was joking with him. He said this is the best his body has felt in years because he hasn't been able to play a whole lot in Minnesota this year. So I think he's got a lot left in the tank and a lot of impetus to go out there and put some good play on film. So listen, man, I think that once Adam Thielen kind of picks up the playbook, who knows how long that's going to take. It could take him a week, 2 weeks. Who knows how long it's going to take for him to pick up the playbook enough for where Arthur Smith and Mike Tomlin will feel comfortable putting him out on the playing surface. But whenever that moment comes, I expect him to play, and I expect him to start. I think he's going to be this team's number 2 wide receiver immediately, alongside, of course, DK Metcalf. And I think Roman Wilson is going to keep his starting job. Just because, he's got more future prospects with this football team than Calvin Austin III does. Calvin is going to be a free agent next year. So even though I don't think Calvin's going to be out of the rotation entirely, I do think Thielen is going to eat into his snap share quite a bit in the weeks to come whenever he ends up getting ramped up. And I've been getting a lot of questions about MVS over the last 24 hours here, asking me, why didn't the Steelers just, add MVS from the practice squad to the active roster? He's got obviously a connection with Aaron Rodgers. He's got that built-in chemistry, so why not just elevate somebody that has already been with the organization for a couple of weeks instead of adding somebody in Adam Thielen who is brand new and has to get ramped up? And I think that those questions are valid, but I think that probably the 2 most likely reasons, and it's probably both of these things, is number 1, he doesn't really add a whole lot to the offense, all right? Like, he's more of just a pure speed threat, more of a deep threat down the field, and the Steelers already have guys that can get open down the field. DK Metcalf has that skill set, and then, of course, Calvin and Roman are both 4-3 guys as well that can get down the field as well. So the only thing that MVS really brings that Calvin and Roman don't is that he's a little bit taller, but it's really not that much of a difference. And honestly, I think Calvin and Roman provide more in terms of their hands, in terms of their ability to get open to the short and intermediate levels of the field. So honestly, I'm not sure MVS really adds a whole lot to the Steelers wide receiver room if you add him from the practice squad. And also, he might just not be playing well in practice, and he might be having a hard time picking up this playbook. Roman Wilson last year, first-year player with this organization, had a hard time doing it. Mike Williams, who was traded to the Steelers midway through the season last year, had a hard time picking it up as well. So he could be just having a tough time picking up this playbook as well. But, I think that Thielen does give this wide receiver room a new element. That's why they're bringing him in, is because this Steelers team has really been looking for that bigger body route runner type to pair with DK Metcalf, Roman Wilson, and Calvin Calvin Austin III. Jacoby Myers was the guy that they were really interested in at the trade deadline. And I like to say Adam Thielen is Jacoby Myers at home because, whenever you're driving with your parents as a kid and you want to go, get French fries or something, or chicken nuggets or something like that at a fast food place, and they'd say, well, we have chicken nuggets at home, and it's never as good as when you go to McDonald's, right? Well, Adam Thielen is kind of, the big body route runner with decent hands at home, right? So it's going to be interesting to see how he plays because it's obviously a really difficult offense to pick up. We've seen a number of receivers have a tough time picking it up because the offense does have multiple plays in the huddle. So not only do you have to know what one play is, you got to know what the other play is, and you got to know the hand signals, you got to know the checks, you got to know everything in order to be a functional piece of this offense. So it's going to be really interesting to see what a savvy veteran like Adam Thielen can do here and how fast he can get ramped up. But predict it for me down there in the comments section. Will Adam Thielen get the start this week? Yes or no? Give me a yes or no down there in the comment section for today's pin question. Just a second here, I'm going to tell you about our sponsor today. While I tell you about our sponsor, simply give me a yes or no to answer today's pin question. And with that, if you guys want a Salute to Service Steelers hoodie just in time for the holiday season here, you guys can go chatsports.com/PittSalute25. If you guys click that link, it's down there in the comments and description of today's show. If you click that link and you make a purchase, part of the proceeds go back to us here at Steelers Talk, and that helps us pay for new equipment. That helps us pay for all the raffle items that we do on the watch parties. That helps us pay for, everything that we do here at Chat Sports to make sure that this content can stay free for you guys. So you can kill two birds with one stone here. If you are interested in the Salute to Service hoodie for either yourself or somebody that you love this holiday season, and you want to help out the channel, you guys can do so right now by purchasing this hoodie at chatsports.com/PittSalute25. So now let's get into Aaron Rodgers here, who spoke to the media this afternoon. Did not practice today, as he hasn't the last 2 weeks, but he will be practicing on Thursday and Friday. He'll be good to go for Sunday afternoon against the Ravens, but it sounds like he might be taking the reins a little bit more and kind of, he's been running meetings all season long. He's been taking a lot of accountability and ownership of this offense. Unfortunately, it hasn't looked the way that they have wanted it to look over the last month or so, month plus at this point, but Rodgers is continuing to do things to try and get things back on the right track here. Jerry Dulac from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette last night reported that Aaron Rodgers had his receivers, tight ends, and running backs to his house last night to watch film and go over plays. It was Rodgers' birthday, by the way, yesterday, his 42nd birthday, and Ben Skoranek brought a decorated cake, and the players sang happy birthday to Rodgers, who turned 42 on Tuesday. So that was great to see Rodgers getting everybody together, trying to get on the same page, watching film together, and the fact that Rodgers could be doing anything in the world on his birthday, and he's trying to get this offense better, at least shows that Rodgers and this group care about the product that they're putting out on the field, and they're really working every single day to make it better down the stretch. And I actually thought that Big Ben Roethlisberger on his podcast, the Football and Podcast, had a really interesting point and maybe idea, which would be to let Aaron Rodgers call his own plays more often. Apparently they tried it towards the end of the game last week against the Bills, and that was when Rodgers and the offense were actually moving the ball a little bit better, is what Ben had to say on his podcast earlier this week. I've heard some things that Aaron, this last game, when they finally moved the ball, Aaron was just calling plays. Maybe it's one of those situations where we unhook the helmet and let Aaron do his thing. And listen, man, especially with Rodgers dealing with this wrist situation where he's not really comfortable taking snaps under center, and he has to take snaps, from the shotgun and the pistol, all this different stuff, I would actually be very open to spreading things out. I know that the Steelers have been a very much condensed formation offense with a lot of tight ends, and they've had a lot of success with that, specifically running it outside of the tackles when they go jumbo personnel, but when they run it in between the tackles from jumbo, they're not quite as successful. So, and when we've seen them go spread, they've actually run in between the tackles quite well, because when you spread things out, obviously the defenders on the other team have to spread things out as well, and the offensive linemen for the Steelers can create more space in between the tackles for Jalen Warren and Kenny Gainwell to knife through. We've seen some success with that. So with Rodgers dealing with the situation where he might not be able to take snaps under center, I think it's an interesting idea to allow Rodgers to kind of run the offense, call his checks, call his audibles, spread things out, make the defense declare what they're in, and then Rodgers kind of picks them apart with his brain. I think that might be a decent way to kind of go about things here as Rodgers continues to get better from that wrist injury. injury. But, moving on here to some concerning injury news for the Pittsburgh Steelers heading into this week. The biggest news being that Derrick Harmon is going to be out again this week. And, this Steelers run game has been, or run defense, I should say, has just been absolutely terrible this year in the 3 games Harmon has missed, including last week's game against the Buffalo Bills. And to not have him this week when you're going up against Derrick Henry is going to be, it's going to suck for the Pittsburgh Steelers. I mean, you guys can just take a look at the 3 games that Harmon has missed. They have given up 182 rush yards to the Jets, 117 rush yards to the Seattle Seahawks, and 249 rush yards to the Buffalo Bills. Obviously, there's been a 100-plus yard rusher in all 3 of these games, Breece Hall, Kenneth Walker, and then James Cook last week. And, this run defense has been absolutely terrible in those 3 games. All right, they've given up 4.6 yards per carry. That would rank 25th among NFL teams this year if that was for the entire season. And they've given up over 180 yards per game, which would rank dead last in the league by about 25 yards. All right, that's how bad the Steelers defense and the Steelers run defense has been without Derrick Harmon, the 300-plus pounder who's been a phenomenal run defender for them this year. That's how much of an impact that he has had on this Steelers run defense. And to not have him for this week in particular in such a big divisional game when you got a huge, hulking, bruising running back that you got to bring down and contain in Derrick Henry, I'm worried about it. I just got to be completely transparent and honest with you guys. This Steelers defense obviously had a hard time stopping him last year in the final 2 games we played against Baltimore. Without Harmon out there, I'm worried that we're going to see a lot of the same this week in Baltimore. But then we get to Coach Tomlin here, who addressed a lot of the frustrations surrounding this football team, and from players and from a fan perspective. This is what Coach T had to say about player frustrations kind of bubbling up in the Bills game and how they need to be better and more mentally tough moving forward. He said, "I think frustration became a component of last week's loss, and that's a natural thing. I got a lot of guys that work extremely hard and put a lot of prep, put a lot into prep, and we want to win and do what's required to win, but we didn't necessarily express that want to appropriately. I own the responsibility of making sure these guys understand a component of being a tough team is to beat is not to beat ourselves. Now, a component of moving on from that is executing better. When you execute better, you make more plays, and frustration becomes less of an issue. I never want people to apologize for caring, and I view some of the frustration displayed last week in that way. Guys were in fight mode. They care. The game wasn't unfolding in the way that we desire. They didn't necessarily express it appropriately, and so as a leader, it's about redirecting that and making sure it's channeled in the right ways. But also, how do we move on from that? The source of that frustration is not playing in the way that we would like to play, and so certainly putting together a good plan and putting them in position to play well is a component of moving on from it." So, something that I'll say about this Pittsburgh Steelers team specifically this year is that it hasn't been a particularly resilient bunch. We've seen the Steelers lead in every single football game this year. Just think about that. They have been leading in every single game this year, yet they're only 6-6, and that is because when things start to go a little bit negatively, we see this team begin to crumble, specifically in the second half. And, something that I wonder is, could Rodgers' kind of negative demeanor when things aren't going well be leading the way there? I mean, I think that, teams take on, generally speaking, the personality of A, their head coach, and B, their quarterback. And, I appreciate Rodgers trying to hold guys accountable, all that stuff. But if Rodgers is being prickly, if he's being negative, if things aren't going right in that way, that could seep into the rest of the offense. That could seep into the rest of the sideline. And obviously, that's not a good thing. Last year with Russell Wilson, who was much more of a positive figure for this offense and for this locker room, we saw this group be actually really resilient. They had multiple fourth-quarter comebacks and game-winning drives and stuff of that nature. And this year, it's been the complete opposite, where this team crumbles in the face of adversity. So I wonder if Rodgers' demeanor has a little bit to do with that. But the good news is, the fact that frustration is bubbling up, I think that's a good thing, because it tells me that players care about it. These players want to play really well. They want to win. They want to win for each other. They want to win for themselves. They want to win for their head coach. They want to win for Aaron. They want to win for all the guys that they're fighting for, because they put their bodies and really their livelihoods on the line here to play this game, and they put a lot of work and effort and pride into what they do, and frankly, it just hasn't been a good enough product this year, and they know that, which is why we're seeing the frustrations bubble up. But the good news is, this is not an indifferent group. They're not, they're not just saying, gee shucks, we're not playing good enough, whatever. It's like, no, this is a group that is highly motivated to get this thing turned around, which is exactly the mindset that they should have at this point in the season. But then Tomlin also addressed fan frustrations, and he was asked directly on Tomlin Tuesday this week about the boos and the fire Tomlin chants, and he kind of surprised some people by saying that he actually agrees with Steelers fans, at least in terms of their frustrations. This is what Tomlin had to say about his job and the nature of the business that he's in. In general, I agree with the fans. Football is our game. We are in a sport and entertainment business, and so if you root for the Steelers, entertaining them is winning. And so when you aren't winning, it's not entertaining. And if you've been in this business, you understand that. So I respect it. I share their frustrations. I understand what makes this thing go, and winning is what makes this thing go. And this is one of the things that I really like about Mike Tomlin from a head coaching perspective, is that he gets the business that he's in. He does not blame fans for criticism ever. All right. He understands the frustrations that fans have. And, this is one of the things that endears me to Coach T. I think Tomlin has a lot of flaws. And I think that if things continue down the way that they're going right now towards the end of the season, I think the Steelers and Tomlin should try to find a way and part ways and try to get a fresh start for both parties. But, the thing about Tomlin is that he does get it. Like, he understands that, the game that they play is football, but, their business is winning. And right now they're not winning enough. And he understands that the nature of the business, if he wants to keep his job, is to get more tallies in the win column. So I appreciate that. But he did give kind of a BS answer on Pat Freiermuth's usage, in my opinion. He kind of talked about how, they've got a lot of quality, type of weapons. This is exactly what he said. I thought it was complete BS. He says, we got a lot of capable guys that we have a lot of confidence in. Pat is certainly one of them. The ball didn't bounce his way a week ago, but certainly he's a viable option for us and one that is strongly considered as we work this week. But the thing is, Coach T, with all due respect, we don't have a lot of capable guys. And, the production from a lot of these guys, throughout the season has certainly pointed to that. Specifically, Jonnu Smith, who has gotten a lot more snaps than Pat Freiermuth, yet he has been way less productive, way less efficient. He's a worse blocker than him. There is no excuse to have Jonnu Smith playing as many snaps as he's playing, especially when you've got a guy in the tight end room like Pat Freiermuth, who is as good of a player as he is. In fact, Jonnu Smith has been pretty much this year's version of an offensive addition that has completely been, a non-factor in the Steelers' offense this year. And, we've seen this the last 2 years. We've seen this movie before from Mike Tomlin and Omar Khan, where they bring in, kind of this older, kind of, nobody type of, offensive weapon that's supposed to fix, the pass catching room and the pass catching problems here in Pittsburgh. They did it with Allen Robinson in 2023. He had 0 touchdowns in 17 games played. I don't even know how that's possible. Hasn't played a starting down in the National Football League since then. Then Van Jefferson last year started a full 17-game stretch, got a full starter's workload. He did get 3 touchdowns, but it just wasn't enough. Only 24 catches in 17 games played is an absolute joke from a number 2 wide receiver in this league. And then this year's iteration of that is when they traded for Jonnu Smith during the offseason. They've been giving him a full starter's workload. Now he's getting more catches than Robinson and Jefferson did, or at least that's the prorated number. That's what it's expected to get to, because they feed him some screens and the designated touches, all that different stuff. But the total yardage is actually less than both Allen Robinson and Van Jefferson. And by the way, that's the number that's projected by the end of the season based on the current numbers that he's getting right now, which is just an absolute travesty, what we're seeing from Jonnu Smith at this point. So you got to sit down Jonnu Smith. Pat Freiermuth absolutely deserves more playing time, and the way you do that is you sit Jonnu Smith's ass on the bench. Then we get to Andrews Peat, where Mike Tomlin confirmed that he will be starting again at left tackle this week. Broderick Jones still on the mend from that neck injury, and Peat, I thought, played pretty decently, about as well as you could have expected from your backup left tackle. Great to see him get another opportunity this week. Speaking of this week, man, it's going to be a big one for Asante Samuel Jr., the newly added corner for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Played a little bit last week when James Pierre went out with that concussion, and the Bills weren't really throwing the football all that much, but he made some nice tackles. He looked pretty good in coverage, and the reason why in particular it's a pretty big week for Asante Samuel Jr. is because of the matchup that he's going to be going up against this week, which is obviously the Baltimore Ravens, which is just not only just a big game for the Pittsburgh Steelers in terms of their season. These two games are probably going to decide who ends up winning the AFC North this year, but also the guy that he's going to be asked to guard on a down-to-down basis, especially because the Steelers are likely to play a lot of man coverage in this game, and that's going to be Zay Flowers, all right? With DeAndre Hopkins being their bigger, more physical wide receiver, I expect Joey Porter Jr. with his longer arms to be going up against D-Hop. This week I expect Asante Samuel Jr., the smaller, shiftier guy, to go up against the smaller, shiftier wide receiver in Zay Flowers. So this is a hell of a test for it to be making your first start of an NFL season. But if I know anything about Asante and the way the guys are talking about him in that locker room, he's going to be ready for that challenge. I can't wait to see him play on Sunday. But sticking with the cornerback room here, Dante Kent, the rookie out of Central Michigan, hasn't practiced since August. Now he's back in the fold. He practiced for the first time today. His 21-day practice window was opened. And honestly, it wouldn't surprise me here where if James Pierre is out with a concussion, that we could potentially see Dante Kent get an opportunity to get a helmet this week. Now, who knows how much he needs to be ramped up, right? He hasn't practiced for a very long time at this point after he got injured in training camp in Latrobe this year. But with Darius Slay now out, and he's, by the way, going to the Buffalo Bills, if you haven't heard the news, you need some more depth at corner if James Pierre is not going to be able to go. I think in that instance, it's probably going to be Dante Kent. But now the final bit of news here today is that TJ Watt did pop up on the injury report with a toe injury. We did see him, kind of hobble off the field last week against the Bills at one point. He ended up coming back in the game, so I can't imagine this injury is too serious. I don't think it's going to be anything that keeps him out of playing action out there. But you could tell after that injury occurred, when he got back out there, like there was a noticeable difference in the way that he could anchor with that foot. So, when you're going up against a guy like Derrick Henry and that offensive line for Baltimore, it's yet another thing to worry about if Watt plays. But in terms of worrying about whether or not, Watt is going to be able to play this weekend, I don't think it's anything to worry about yet. TJ usually, skips at least one day of practice a week for veteran rest. This might just be part of that kind of deal. But with the added toe injury, that might just be what pops up there on the injury report. So we'll keep you updated on TJ Watt's status as the week goes on. But before I go here, the Tomlinism of the week from yesterday's press conference from Coach T. Somebody asked him about what the identity of the Pittsburgh Steelers are right now. I think the question exactly was, does this team have an identity? And I like Tomlin's answer. He said, yeah, we're 6-6, and I don't like it. So, the fact that, people in that building understand that 6-6 is not good enough, that things need to get better. The first step in acknowledging a problem or fixing a problem is to acknowledge you have a problem, and it certainly seems like the Steelers are doing that. The leadership is taking accountability. I think that Mike Tomlin has a good sense of, what the situation is right now, and we'll see if he's able to turn things around down the stretch. But I think Mike Tomlin certainly feels the heat at this point in the season. So predict it for me down there in the comment section. What will the Steelers' final record be this year? Will they finish with a winning record or a losing record? For me, I think they're going to get to 9-8, which might be good enough to win the division. We'll see. But I think they win 3 out of their last 5 games. What do you guys think? Let me know down there in the comment section. And that'll be it for today's edition of Steelers News and Rumors presented by Chat Sports. I will see you guys next time. And until then, guys, here we go, Steelers.